Who has my pig?
Our pig we actually found through Michael and I took some early scouts to Portland and toured a number of pig farms. And we found this breed of pig called the Kuni, which is a New Zealand breed. And this particular little girl was named Brandy, and just the cutest, most beautiful pig we had come across. And we decided to cast her as our lead, but she wasn't actually a trained movie pig. So she was just a pig living her life pleasantly out on a farm, and then got kind of sucked into this production. So it took a little bit of attempting to train the pig so she could, do the commands properly, but she ended up really working out great.
It wasn't exactly a creative choice. It was just that we couldn't afford an acting pig. But Brandy, she was very authentically a pig. So I think that comes across. I mean, she was not in the pig attack scene, the pig napping scene, as people have come to call it. But yeah, I mean, that scene was kind of an interesting meeting of lots of talents. That was Pat Scola, the DP, the cinematographer, who just was like an Olympic athlete shooting that sequence, because it was all one long take. And he was just like doing the splits and getting all these crazy angles and having to keep up with all of the action. That was a combination of Pat being incredible, and then Nick just, we didn't have a ton of time to like rehearse the stunts. We were kind of just figuring it out as we went along, and we had sort of talked to Lex Damus, the stunt coordinator, about our ideas, and he had made some suggestions, but we just rehearsed for like 10 minutes before actually shooting it. So Nick just knows how to take a punch. He knows how to take a fall. He's extremely, just gifted in that. I mean, he's done plenty of action movies, and so he made that easy. I mean, it was just one of those sequences that should have fallen apart and been extremely difficult, but it was hard, but we just kind of managed to do it because everyone was super talented and knew what they were doing.
We were on a 20-day shoot in general, so everything had to be done with a lot of precision. There just wasn't time to go back and try things again or really rehearse in any way. So yeah, like Michael said, it really was just this meeting of everybody bringing their A game. The splits that our DP landed, that wasn't him just doing gymnastics on the side. He was actually operating in that scene. And so when he had to like drop down with the camera for the moment that Nick kind of collapses. And so when he did that, he literally landed in like a perfect split. It was quite something.
I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like, if you actually watch what's happening in the scene, there's a lot of like moving with Nick's perspective, so the camera will like tilt 180 degrees with him, and so it wasn't just kind of like following the action. Like, Pat was just right in there with it and falling on the ground sideways. I mean, it was kind of incredible that he nailed that so well.
Today's journey begins by uniting the depths of the sea with the riches of our forests. We've emulsified locally sourced scallops, encased in a flash-frozen seawater roe blend, on a bed of foraged huckleberry foam, all bathed in the smoke from Douglas fir cones.
I'd like to speak to the chef.
The Eurydice scene, or the Chef Finway scene, this takes place at this restaurant called Eurydice, and I mean, that scene was like 10 pages in the script, and it was one of those scenes that, it was kind of, if we could make that scene work, we thought we could make the rest of the movie work. And we shot it, we had one day to shoot it. We kind of shot it like a little play. We pretty much did it in one long chunk and just ran it multiple times. And the actors just did such an incredible job that they were willing and able to kind of keep that energy up. And then that was one of the first scenes that the editor, Brett, cut together. And it was like we could watch that and say, okay, this scene actually in the edit is playing and it's really powerful. If we can pull this off, then I think the rest of the movie is going to be okay. So it was one of those, it was sort of a linchpin scene of the whole film in a lot of ways. And it's also kind of like a microcosm of the whole movie. It goes through a lot of the humor and sadness and somberness and identity stuff that kind of is the entire film, but encapsulated in this one conversation.
How are you? My God, you've been off the scene for what, 10 years?
15.
Really? Okay. I thought you were, well, I mean, the time is very,
Sure.
Yeah. I'm sorry, do you need medical attention?
No. Thank you.
Yeah, and underlying all of that is I think where you feel the electricity of Nicolas Cage and like the intensity of that growth. So you are waiting for that moment where he just, goes full Nicolas Cage or whatever the cultural association with that happens to be. One other point I wanted to make about shooting that scene, and this has really stayed with me. So I remember talking to our cinematographer, Pat Scola, and on this particular day, like Michael said, we shot it all in this one location, this restaurant called Sauce Box. And it was bordered by all of these windows. So you could really, like, the light from outside was a strong presence in the scene. And everyone was kind of relieved, where it was like, okay, finally, we can just stay in one space. We're like indoors for the day. We have one day where we don't have to move around. And I was expressing that to Pat, and he was a little hurt, because he was like, yeah, we didn't move around, but this was actually one of the most challenging days for the camera department, because we were tasked to make the scene look like it took place within 10 minutes, even though we were shooting over the course of an entire day. So remember, the natural light was changing every moment. And so they were scrambling to make it look like a seamless, continuous scene, which was an enormous task and one of the most challenging for that department in the entire shoot. So it was this really beautiful kind of look into how I think it's really important when making a film, you really understand the machinations of every single department and what it takes, what goes into making a moment like that may look from the outside so seamless, but it really takes the efforts of so many people working so hard. So it was just a really kind of special moment of education, I think, for me, even, of just sort of looking behind the curtain and seeing what it really takes to accomplish something like that.
Why didn't you open your pub?
I don't know that I really wanted. I mean, obviously, that was such a long time ago.
When I fired you, I asked you what you wanted to do. You said you have a few rooms upstairs. A real English pub.
Did I say that?
Yes.
Nobody wants pubs around here. It's just a terrible investment.
What was going to be your signature dish?
Liver Scotch eggs with a honey curry mustard.
It's like pretty much almost an all-male cast. Certainly our major leads are men, and it's very much their journey and their kind of grappling with their own experiences of pain. But I think in a way, also the resonance of this is that it's exploring masculinity, frankly, in a different way than we normally see. And Nicolas Cage, who could very easily be just sort of seen as like the epitome of, what it means to be a man, whatever that means, for him to play a performance and explore facets of the masculine experience or the male experience that's so, I think, unique and surprising to people, has almost been like an outlet for some to be able to tap into something that I think a lot of people have felt but haven't sort of felt like it was given a voice or given its expression. So that's also been a fascinating part of the experience of making this.
Yeah, it's interesting that we didn't exactly set out to make an anti-violence movie. I mean, it has that in its DNA, and it's it just felt right that his solution to these problems was not violence. He had other things he needed to discover about himself and about how to interact with people, and like it just wouldn't make sense on a character level for him to just go bonkers and beat everyone up. But at the same time, it's just we default to kind of assuming that that's the way that people deal with these kinds of injustices, and it's we didn't intend for it to be a big statement on that, but I guess that's kind of inherent in the material, and it has been funny to see how surprised people are by it not being violent. Like it definitely says something about our expectations and our culture that just we default to assuming that that's where things are going to go. Yeah, the first dish in the movie was the mushroom tart, which that was Chef Chris Sarnoski, whose they're a family of like truffle hunters, and they have the Joel Palmer house, and they're just incredible. And then the final dish was designed by Gabe Rucker, who is just like a top chef in Portland, just really incredible. Yeah, that was kind of a whirlwind scene to shoot. Like we knew it needed to have a lot of care and tenderness and specificity. And a big part of that was kind of letting Pat Scola, the DP, and then Gabe Rucker just kind of play. Like Gabe was there saying like, here's something that Nick could try, and Nick would try it, and Pat would be like, oh great, like let me grab this angle. So like we had sort of a general idea of what we wanted to do for it, but we kind of let, like we sort of just, it was kind of like Gabe was instructing Nick on how to cook this stuff as we were kind of figuring out the shots in real time. And part of that was because we had very little time to shoot it, and we were just kind of trying to get through it. But I think it added a nice authenticity and a nice energy to it. Like it wasn't too pretentious or planned. It was just kind of, we were figuring it out and figuring out what felt nice. Alex and Nick just really were in it. Part of what I think helped make that work was that Nick had learned the recipe previously. He had gone into Gabe's restaurant and had a training day going through it and had been practicing his skills. But Alex hadn't. He didn't know. So Nick was literally teaching Alex the recipe as we were shooting it. So it had this actual sense of like, oh no, he is like sharing this thing with Amir. And that, I think that helped quite a bit in the authenticity of it.
One funny little anecdote, the scene starts with Nick washing his hands, as is custom with, you know, anyone preparing food. So COVID hit kind of in the midst of the editing, just at the very end of our editing process. And one of Nick's notes was for us to extend the hand washing scene in the edit, because it was a good thing to encourage people to take extra time to wash their hands before touching anything.